Hi class, this is Dr. Karsten, and I'm actually going to do a slightly different version of Lesson 23, and this is from Module 5, Grade 4, Engage New York Math. I really am not thrilled with the way the lesson is structured, and so I wanted to kind of do a really quick redo of it for you in a way that might make a little bit more sense. So let's first just kind of review something that we've done in class a whole bunch of times. So let's say that I'm adding 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. Something that I've always said to you guys is I'll say, how many times did I add 2? And you'll tell me, oh, 4 times. And then I'll say to you, okay, well, if I'm adding 2 4 times, can I say then that that would be the same thing as 4 times 2, or again, 2 4 times? And it's just a different way that we can write this. So again, if I'm adding 2 4 times, I can say 2 4 times, or 4 times 2. Let's do one more of these. Let's do 3 plus 3. And another way to write that would be to say, well, I added 3 2 times, or 2 times 3. We can do the same exact thing when we're working with fractions. So let's say I'm working with 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. So here I've added 1/2 3 times. Well, another way to say that is 3 times 1/2, or 1/2 3 times. So that's the first concept that I just wanted to review with you. The other one that I think we need a little bit of review on is, well, two things. One of them is, again, to make up a whole. Let's say I'm dealing with halves. If I want to make one whole out of halves, I need 2 halves because 2 over 2 is one whole. Another way to think about that is if I have a cupcake and I cut it in half, if I have both pieces, I have the whole cupcake. Well, now what about if I cut that cupcake into 4 pieces? Well, then the whole cupcake is going to be 4 fourths. So 2 halves, 4 fourths. When our numerator and our denominator match, then they are going to make up one whole. So those were a couple of really quick concepts that I wanted to review with you that are really important to this lesson. So let's keep going. And now let's look at what this lesson is talking about. So I'm just going to jump into, well, let's talk about this. Let's say that I have 6 times 1/3. Well, what is that really saying? It's saying that I have 1/3 6 times. So I have 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. Oh, I'm going off the screen. There we go. So I have 1/3 6 times. And what we are going to try to do in today's lesson is to really, instead of trying to deal with all these 1/3s, is we want to group them into wholes. Well, what do I know? I know that 3/3 is equal to 1 whole. So how could I group this to make wholes? Well, I'm going to group them into 3 of these 1/3s. So here, now I know this makes 1 whole. This is 1 whole, and this is a whole. So now what I know is that I have 2 wholes here. Now the way we were doing that before was we were doing, oh my goodness, I'm blocking on what we call them, which is so funny. But we would model it instead like this. And let me, the number bonds, that's what I'm looking for. So where we would say here that I have 6/3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what we've been doing was we were taking 6/3 and we would say, oh, well, I can do 3/3 and 3/3, and that's 1 whole and that's 1 whole, so now I know it's equal to 2. Today we're doing it a little differently, where we're looking at it like this, using fractions, and we're also going to use a number line. And I'm just going to do like one quick question with you guys. I'm not going to go crazy on this, because again, I'm not thrilled with this. But the idea here is that I have 3/3. This is 3/3. This is 3/3. So how many times do I have 3/3? Well, I have 3/3 2 times. So another way of writing it would be to say that 6 times 1/3 is the same thing as saying 2 times 3/3, or 3/3 2 times. Here's 3/3 and here's 3/3, because what we really want to do is group it into wholes. We want to group it into units. So let me do one more of these, and you know what, let me put this one on the number line for you. I think the number, well, no, I'm not, because the number line is confusing you guys like crazy. So let's just learn how to write it like this and to show it like this. And maybe I'll do the next one on a number line just so that you guys do get to see it. So one of the questions that I assigned to you guys to do was 4B from the problem set. And that was to do 7 copies of 1/2. So let's kind of think about that really quick. If I want 7 copies of 1/2, another way to write that is I'm saying 7 times 1/2, or 1/2 7 times. 7 copies of it just means 7 times of it. I need it 7 times. Let's write it out the long way. So what I have is 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. I have 3 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them, 6 of them, 7 of them. So 7 times 1/2, or 1/2 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now another way though is for us to start grouping them into wholes. And what I know is that 2/2 is equal to 1 whole. So I'm going to go ahead and group those into wholes, and let's see how many wholes we have. So here I have a 1/2 and a 1/2, so that's a 1/2 2 times, and that's 1 whole. And here's another time that I did it, so I have a 1/2 2 times again, so that's 1 whole. And here I have a 1/2 2 times, and that's another whole. So I have 1, 2, 3 wholes, because a 1/2 and a 1/2 is 1 whole. I have 1, 2, 3, and then I still have 1/2 left. So what I'm seeing is, I'm going to go ahead and write that, is that I have 3 wholes, and then I have another 1/2. Well, how can we show that in another way using a mathematical sentence? Well, what I know is that this is really 2/2, and this is really 2/2, and this is really 2/2, because 2/2 is a whole, and 2/2 is a whole, and 2/2 is a whole. And then I still have my 1/2 here. So what I could say is that I have 2/2 3 times, or 3 times 2/2. So again, I have 2/2 3 times. I'm going to group that, and then I still have that 1/2 on the end. So what do I end up with? Well, remember, 2/2, this is really just 1 whole. What I could, let me just rewrite it a slightly different way. Couldn't I just say that this is 3 times 1? Yeah, so I have 3 wholes, because this is a whole. 2/2 makes a whole. So I have 3 wholes plus a 1/2. So it's 3 wholes plus a 1/2. All right, I'm going to do the number line one time for this one. You know what, I'm going to zoom out a little bit for us.